Most people think capitalism is simple. It's free markets, limited government, and the belief that if everyone chases their own interests, society somehow balances itself. Ask where this idea comes from, and you will hear the same name every time. Adam Smith, the father of economics. The man behind the invisible hand. But here is the uncomfortable truth. The version of capitalism that quotes Adam Smith the loudest is the one he warned us about. Welcome to American Life Guide, where money, power, and history collide, and nothing is ever as simple as it seems. Before we talk about the invisible hand, we need to step back, because most people have never actually been told what Adam Smith believed, and that isn't an accident. For more than a century, an economic mythology has been built using Smith's name, repeated so often it feels like common sense. Government should stay out of the economy, markets should run freely, and competition will automatically create prosperity. Economists later called this laissez-faire, hands-off, and Adam Smith was credited as its inventor. But he never said that, not once. In fact, if Adam Smith saw what modern capitalism calls free markets, he would probably ask who rewrote his book and why the warnings were removed. To understand Smith, you have to understand his world. He was born in 1723 in Scotland, a society defined by class, scarcity, and rigid hierarchy, where birth mattered more than talent. Britain was not a land of free markets. It was a mercantilist empire. Trade was controlled by monopolies, prices were set by guilds, and entire industries were dominated by cartels. Global commerce was ruled by massive corporations like the East India Company, a business with its own army and political power rivaling governments. This was the economy Smith studied, a world where economic power and political power were deeply entangled. Markets were shaped, manipulated, and often rigged by private interests. Smith didn't praise this system, he feared it. He warned that when merchants gain influence, they don't compete, they conspire. His words were blunt. People of the same trade seldom meet together without plotting against the public. That isn't free market worship. It's a warning. Another truth textbooks often skip is that Adam Smith wasn't trained as an economist. He was a moral philosopher. Before The Wealth of Nations, he wrote The Theory of Moral Sentiments, a book about empathy, fairness, and human behavior. Smith didn't believe greed built societies. He believed morality did. That context completely changes how we should understand his most famous idea, the invisible hand. Today it's treated like a law of nature, proof that markets regulate themselves. But Smith used the phrase only 3 times in everything he ever wrote. And not one of those uses describes deregulated capitalism. Not one claims markets magically fix injustice or that power should go unchecked. The invisible hand was never the foundation of his philosophy. It was a footnote. The first time Smith used the phrase, it had nothing to do with economics at all. It appeared in an essay about astronomy, where he criticized humanity's tendency to blame unexplained events on invisible forces. He was mocking superstition, not celebrating it. The second use appears in The Wealth of Nations and is the one everyone quotes, but the context is always erased. Smith describes a merchant who invests locally instead of abroad, not out of wisdom or patriotism, but fear. Fear of loss pushes him toward a decision that accidentally benefits domestic industry. That's the invisible hand, not intention, not virtue, just private anxiety producing a public benefit by coincidence. The third and final use is even darker. Smith describes wealthy landowners who hoard enormous resources but still end up feeding the poor simply because they cannot consume everything themselves. A man can own vast lands, but he can only eat one meal at a time. The poor survive on leftovers. That is the invisible hand in moral terms, not justice, but inevitability. Superstition, fear, and the limits of gluttony. These are Smith's invisible hands, not the sacred laws of modern capitalism. Yet across the 20th century, this small metaphor was transformed into doctrine. Economists elevated it, politicians weaponized it, and corporations embraced it. The invisible hand became an excuse to oppose regulation rather than understand markets. Adam Smith was turned into the mascot of deregulation. Even though he spent his life warning that unchecked merchants would distort markets to enrich themselves, this reinterpretation was strategic. As industrial giants like railroads, oil empires, and financial conglomerates rose, They needed philosophical legitimacy. They found it in a simplified, sanitized version of Smith. During the Cold War, that version became ideology. Capitalism needed a moral story to oppose communism, and nuance was inconvenient, so it was erased. What Smith actually feared is exactly what followed. Corporations large enough to influence laws, crush competition, and overpower governments. He warned about monopolies, supported regulation, and believed governments must intervene when power concentrates. But those pages were ignored. Today's economy reflects Smith's nightmares, not his hopes. Tech giants shape information, financial institutions demand bailouts, and entire markets operate like cartels with better public relations. These aren't free markets. They are managed outcomes. Invoking the invisible hand as a safety net feels less like economics and more like superstition, the same human instinct Smith criticized centuries ago. Markets don't regulate abuse on their own. Power doesn't restrain itself. Greed doesn't stop voluntarily. Adam Smith never promised that the invisible hand would save us. He argued for balanced markets strong enough to innovate, governments strong enough to restrain, and societies wise enough to demand fairness. The invisible hand was never meant to rescue humanity. Smith believed we had to rescue ourselves, because history doesn't repeat, but misunderstanding, it always comes at a cost. If this changed how you see capitalism, subscribe. History already has the answers. I'll show you where to look.